Fog me. Yeah. Ooh, she's smoking. Ooh, I like that. This girl is on fire. Yeah, she is.
I love it.
Woo.
Smoking.
Serious smoking. Chicks are scary. Hair in my mouth. What the heck? I'm good. Hey y'all, what's up? It's Kellen with K&T Do Halloween, back with another makeover video. I know what you guys like. Now for this makeover video, I know I can already hear the groans and moans in the comment. I'm gonna be doing a prop that I've done before. I'm sure you guys saw the thumbnail, and it's just a concept I couldn't shake. So let's bring him in. Here he is. Don't be too disappointed, because we are really going to transform this prop. We're not gonna do another zombie, so calm down. Everybody be calm. We're going to make it very different. Chill. Now, if you've subscribed to our channel for a while, you know that we made Punctured Pete over about a year ago. Originally, the concept I wanted to take it was in the direction of a female vampire who had been impaled and, you know, all that kind of funness. It just didn't end up working out in the end, and we pivoted and ended up just making over the zombie. Let's grab some paper and get at least a game plan before we go into this. Could we please take a moment to appreciate this notebook? It says Italian on it. To be clear, I haven't taken Italian since 17 years. Quarter. Ridiculous. I save everything. Oh. Come here, come on. Now this prop definitely needs a new name. I was thinking Punctured Priscilla, but if you have any better ideas, let me know in the comment section below. First thing I'm gonna do is draw in all the mechanics, as well as all the prop components that exist. The shoulders, the head, the hands, the legs, before I start layering things on top. Of course, I want to add fangs. I definitely want to repaint the eyes. I think I want to add a nose because it reads very much zombie. Now for the costume, I definitely want to choose something that is light in color and very flowy. That way all of the details that I layer on top of it will pop. I also want to add a burn texture to her face and hands, add some mud around her knees, and I really want to add fog and some really cool flicker lighting inside. I also want to use some wildfire paint to create a really cool effect where she's going to look like she's burning from the inside out. And I think I want to add some chains to really enhance this tortured vampire vibe. I'm still not a very good drawer? That doesn't sound right. I'm not very good at drawing, still. The fun stuff. Now that I have a rough idea on paper, I at least have a baseline to start. And when I say Victorian, that is a massive period. I'm more specifically saying French fashion, something like Marie Antoinette. Let them eat cake. Calm down, I know she didn't say that. It's referred to as the Georgian era. To give you the Cliff Notes version, neoclassical, Georgian, burnt, aristocratic vampire queen. Not bad. The reason I'm being so completely specific about the costuming in the era is more so because I'm giving you an insight into how my design brain works. I was always taught to start with a reference point. That way, as you're working through the design process, if you hit a roadblock at any point, you can always refer back to that original concept. Now, of course, that doesn't mean you can't refer back and say, I don't want to do that and be a rule breaker, because that's way more fun. But it goes back to the age-old saying, you have to know the rules before you can break them. Helps me pull back a little bit and make sure that I haven't just gone crazy, which is very easy to do with Halloween props. The main reason I'm going for more of a young woman or a middle-aged woman sort of design is because I think the female props that we mostly see kind of get pigeonholed, unfortunately, into two very stereotypical categories. Creepy little girls, scary old women. I know there's a few exceptions, but that just bums me out. Come on, Spirit, give us some more female props, because let's be honest, as I said before, chicks are scary. Do you guys remember Demonica? I should drag her out. One of our first prop makeovers was a Demonica prop. I think we've made her over 3 or 4 times, but I should drag her out. That might be a really cool video. So let's get started and get this guy out of the box. I forgot how many pieces this thing had. Let's see if I still got this. Get some hocus pocus going on here. Ah, still got it. Let's go turn this guy into a fancy vampire lady. I gotta go, come on. Time to get to work. First thing I need to do is I need to tape off the eyes. I'm gonna use some frog tape and an X-Acto knife. That way I don't have to clean them up later after I put the paint on. Do not use spray paint on these types of props. You will have a chemical reaction and you will struggle to have it dry. I'm applying 2 layers of a flat black latex paint. This won't react with the paint and it will give me something that I can paint and sculpt on top of. Primer on the stake and hands, and now it's time to sculpt. I'm using my favorite epoxy sculpt. You start off by mixing equal parts together until you have a consistent color, wait 5 minutes, and then you're ready to sculpt. You have a working time of up to 2 hours and it will dry hard and rigid like plastic, and it can also be sanded. I'm going to start by sculpting the nose. I have a mirror off camera because I've never sculpted a nose before. I'm just using it as reference, and I have to say I'm pretty proud of my nose. It's not perfect and it's the first one I've ever sculpted, but I had a lot of fun sculpting it. I'm also going to use the epoxy sculpt to add some fangs onto the front. Ideally, I wanted to find some pre-made fangs, but I'm gonna work with these for now. I'm taking the remaining epoxy sculpt and putting it on top of the stake. I really wanted that Bram Stoker's Dracula stereotypical flared stake look, and this was just the easiest way to do it. I'm blending the edges, and then I'm using my fingernail and some sculpting tools just to add some texture into the top. Time to give this beauty some hair. I selected a red wig and I'm using some acrylic latex caulk to glue around the hairline and a chip brush just to blend it in. I'll be using this as kind of a melted hair and skin texture, and I'll be painting over it later. Time to create some fun texture. I'm going to be using rigid casting foam. It's basically 2 liquids that you mix together that will expand and harden. I'm mixing a very small amount to work with. This has a very short working time and I have to work in very small sections. I'm using a paintbrush just to apply it to the areas, and as it expands, I'm knocking it down with the paintbrush, and you can see when it's done, it's done. The brush and the cup and everything is toast. Once it's dried, I'm going back in with some sandpaper and sanding everything down to really open up the cells of the foam to give us that burnt texture. You need to have some decent texture if you're going to do the effect where you apply UV paint and then dry brush black over the top. Grabbing the Wildfire UV paint, you can see my camera is really struggling to focus on this eye-numbing orange. I'm going to go ahead and apply 1 coat over the top, and then I'm going to move over to the face. I'm doing the same thing where I'm mixing small batches and applying it with a chip brush. You see I'm going to do this 3 or 4 times to be able to cover the entire face. I know it's going to look really crazy, but I'm going to go back in again with some sandpaper and file it all down. You need to have, again, quite a bit of texture to have this effect really work. I'm going through with just a foam shaper and I'm knocking down all the really high portions. Then I'm going to go back through with some sandpaper as I did on the hands and just define all of the face shapes. You have to be very careful here because you don't want to lose the shape of the face, and I definitely don't want to lose all the hard work I put into sculpting that nose. Now, this process was definitely new to me and I was nervous about it, so I tested it on some cardboard before I applied it to the face. Looking back now, I wish I had gone a little more intense with the texture on the face, but I'm still very happy with how it came out. Grabbing that retina burning orange again, and I'm going to apply my first coat all over the entire face. And now comes the fun part. Using some flat black latex paint, I'm dry brushing over the top of each hand. I'm being very careful not to use a lot of paint and to make sure that I don't get that black paint down in the crevices. You'll see I'm also using my black light. Anytime you're painting with black light paint, you want to make sure you see what it looks like under black light. I'm slowly building up my texture until I have something that I like. Now I'm grabbing some gray paint and I'm going to be dry brushing a very little bit in certain highlight spots of the hand. I'm basically using the ash as the highlight color. This is going to really enhance that crispy burn texture, and that UV paint will glow from within once UV light is applied. They look pretty cool. I'm really excited by this technique. It was so much fun.
Moving on to the face, I'm going to be using that same dry brushing technique. All dry brushing is you're applying paint to your brush, wiping most of it off before applying it to the top layer or texture of your prop. This is definitely a technique where you can always add more, but it's very hard to pull it back. I'm also making sure that I'm using my black light and I'm staying away from the high spots of the face. So the top of the nose, the brow, the cheeks. I also want to use that glowing ember to really highlight the face. She was creeping me out, so I had to paint some eyeballs on her before I moved on to painting the teeth. I'm just using an ivory color as a base, and then I'm gonna go back in with some white paint once it dries. Ugh, I really don't like those teeth. While I'm waiting for the teeth to dry, I'm just grabbing some of my black primer and I'm going through and just softening some of the areas. So I'm painting around the eyes and the hairline before going in and removing the tape off of the eyes so I can get in on those guys. Because these eyes do light up, I want to make sure that I maintain that effect. I'm going in with some white paint first, and I'm just painting around the whites of the eyes, being very careful to stay away from the iris area. I built up several layers of this white paint to make sure that the light only pierces through the center iris or pupil of the eye. Using some translucent yellow paint, I'm very carefully going around the irises, being sure not to completely cover them. Now that everything has dried, I'm going to put some matte varnish in my airbrush and spray the entire face down. I worked very hard on this paint job and I definitely don't want it to get ruined or damaged, so I applied 2 coats and let that completely dry before moving on. Now that the eyes are dry, I'm just going to grab a Sharpie and I'm just adding some lines through the iris, then putting a thick layer of wet on top of it to give them that shiny look.
It's me. Just wanted to take a second to send a huge thank you to Steve over at Grimwood Hollow. He was a wealth of knowledge when working on this project, and specifically with the burnt texture that I created on the hands and face. I would not have been able to achieve such amazing results without his advice, and I just can't thank him enough. By day, Steve is a Disney Imagineer, working in physical and digital sculpting in their dimensional design department. Now I know that's a mouthful, but it is probably the coolest department you could ever work for in the Disney Imagineering field. They are responsible for creating everything from scale models and miniatures used as reference points to make sure that the vision for the areas that are being created are realized, as well as creating full-size scale production pieces that are seen in the parks. It's really spectacular. Now by night, he has his own nightmare workshop where he's creating things for his own yard haunt as well as for many others. Steve also has worked all throughout television and film, from makeup artist to actual prop design and everything in between. I was a 90s kid, so for me, he worked on Men in Black. He was one of the few people that actually created all of the weapons and props that were used in that movie, including the neuralizer. How cool is that? And if that wasn't cool enough, he also has an orange mohawk. What else do you need? You know what, this is just easier. Hold on a second. Ladies and gentlemen, can you go ahead and look right here for me? Now you're just watching the most amazing YouTube video, to which you're going to watch to the end, and hit that like button and smash that subscribe button if you haven't already. But your life will not be complete until you go over to the Grimwood Hollow YouTube channel and check out all of their amazing content. That is all.
Moving on to the stake, I'm just doing a quick paint job, painting the epoxy sculpt black before I go back in with several colors of brown paint. I'm using exterior latex paint. I'm going through with a dry brushing technique because the stake has a pretty decent texture sculpted into it already. Once I put the dark brown color in as the base, I'm going back in with a lighter brown color and dry brushing over the top. Before I move on to the costume, I just had to swap out those teeth. I didn't like the ones that I sculpted, so I opted to tear them out and replace them with some prefabricated acrylic ones that I had. This was definitely a risky decision, but I am a perfectionist and I really hated the teeth that I had installed prior. Once I ripped the original epoxy sculpt teeth that I had installed, I cut out the rubber and used hot glue to glue these pre-made acrylic ones on. Once they were dry, I simply went back in with some of my perma-blood just to blend in the areas and make sure everything looked right. So much better. I'm working on some costume jewelry that I purchased off of Amazon. I think it was maybe like $4 or $5. I'm going through and removing all of the little skull pieces before taping off all of the gems. I'm then going to put some white paint into my airbrush and just make it look like dirty lace. onto costuming. Now, where's the costume? Oh God. Through the tree. We can see you.
Oh, hey.
Busted. Get back to work. First thing I need to do is test fit the costume and cut out the hole where the stake will actually fit through the chest. I'm also attaching the arms. I'm just trying to lay everything out. Once I made sure everything fit, I installed my fog tubing, which is just 1.5-inch tubing I got off Amazon, then grabbing some black spray paint to paint the foam arms, the shoulders, and the top of the collar piece to the shirt. Now I'm moving on to some shackles. They're plastic ones that I found at the dollar store. I'm just spray painting them chrome, and these will go on her wrists. Now I'm hot gluing some creepy cloth to the top neck piece before moving on to cutting up strips of creepy cloth. I'm using hot glue to then wrap those around the foam arms. I apologize, this is slightly out of camera. I didn't realize that my camera tilted down while I was filming, and I kind of caught it halfway through. All I'm doing is bunching up the dress and using black spray paint to go all over it in just a random pattern. Then going back through with some yellow for some sweat stains around the pits, and some brown and some white. I also dunked the bottom hem of the dress as well as the sleeves into some black RIT dye. Now it's into the garage to zip tie the fog tube, do a little fog testing, and make sure that everything is working. Next thing I have to do is install my lighting. I'm just roughly placing it, and I'm zip tying the cords to the center column well out of the way of the mechanism that operates the prop. I'll be attaching these to Velcro and the inside of the costume later. Moving on to the costume, I really want fog pouring out of a hole in her chest. So what I've done is I painted a burn spot, I cut out a slit, and I'm using some black netting on the inside of the costume to mask it. What this will do is it will make it look all black until it actually lights up from the inside when the prop activates. I used a little bit of hot glue to secure it around the edges, and I also added some wildfire paint on the outside of the cut. Now I'm starting to assemble the prop. I put the shoulders on, and now I'm messing with the neck piece. Once I've applied the dress, I then can actually attach the arms and then the stake and hands. Now after I have attached the stake and before I have zip tied the arms to the wrists, I'm going to put on the chain and shackles that I painted earlier. Moving on to the back side, I'm going to be attaching the lights to the inside of the costume. Using hot glue, I'm just going to attach pieces of Velcro to the lights as well as inside of the costume. That way they're removable, and if something happens or they fail, I can always replace them later. The larger light I'm placing just below the cutout that I made for the smoke to pour out, and the second light I'm attaching to the top side of the stake. Both of these are meant to highlight the smoke that's going to come out of the prop. And now I'm using a little bit of brown acrylic latex caulk to fill in some of the holes on the top side of the stake so they aren't so obvious. I'm now grabbing my airbrush with some black primer and just distressing the chain a little bit, really focusing on the wrist as if the prop was burning and has charred the metal. I'm also using the airbrush to soften some of the wildfire paint around the hole and just detail the color. Of course, I always have some wisdom to inject in there right before you guys get to see what it finally looks like, but I wanted to mention a few things because I know I'm going to get questions about it, so we can address it right now. First of all, I am using just a 400-watt fog machine from Spirit. Nothing special. I decided that using a timer on it was probably the most beneficial thing, just because, well, to be honest, it's shooting fog into a body, into a costume, so it doesn't have to be on cue. It's not going to make it any better or any worse, so just setting it to go off every 5 to 10 minutes would work perfectly. And then using the fog tube that I found, I think it's like 1.5 inch or something like that, worked really, really well. The second thing I want to go over is how we're going to actually activate the prop. Now the prop has, I believe, a sound sensor or something in it that activates it. We're going to go with our same method, the tried and true, just kind of generic plug-in motion sensor. There is a plug base, as you can see here, and then a corded motion sensor that is about 6 feet long. That seems to work particularly well for us with this prop. We just end up plugging the lights, the actual prop, into the motion sensor, and then we are good to go. It turns on and off every 2 minutes or so, and it works a lot better for us because we can actually run the motion sensor to a different area along our pathway. So we're going to be activating it the same way as we did with the first Punctured Pete because that just worked out better, and since we have lights installed in this prop as well, we want to make sure that they activate activate at the same time. Heavy camera. Now the third thing is going to be sound. We get this question constantly. There is no realistic, feasible, or cost-effective way to modify the sound chips that are in 99% of the Spirit Halloween animatronics. If you guys are interested, maybe we should do a video on how to replace or supplement the sound effects for Spirit props, or at least our approaches. There's a few different ways, but I can tell you none of them really include modifying the microchips that are really baked in with these sound files. It's sort of the concept of trying to think that you could write over a DVD that you bought from Walmart. They're not designed to go the other direction. They're kind of a one-time use thing, and to be able to make your own, just doesn't make sense. Let me know in the comments below if you guys are interested in a video on how we modify our Spirit Halloween props with sound, I guess. The thing we're gonna be using for this prop is something like this right here. This is basically a motion activated speaker. They're pretty readily available. I know recently they've gotten a bit more expensive. This one's probably 3 or 4 years old, and I think we got it for about $80. It seems to be the most cost-effective way if you really don't care about the sound completely syncing up with the props. We have tested it, and I can put this motion sensor right next to the motion sensor that we're plugging into the prop, and they activate at the same time about 98% of the time, which will work fine for us. The other thing is you basically can upload on the side with an SD card a sound, an ambient sound as well as a triggered sound. We're just going to be using a triggered sound. It just seemed to work out better. Some crackling fire and some screaming vampire noises should work out perfectly. Usually with these props, I like to use the original sound. It's kind of the homage to the original prop, but this one, it just doesn't work. It sounds like a grunting zombie, and it just doesn't sound like a hissing, burning vampire, so we had to do something about the sound. The final thing is the mechanics. I just want to address that because this prop had a pretty high failure rate in stores. Now, our puncture Pete that we modified hasn't had any issues, and we run it quite often. I know with these props, the motor isn't the failure point, it's actually the rubber band that they use to attach kind of the two motor joints to the actual movement. It just starts to wear out, and the prop can't support the weight. Of course, I did add some weight to the head of this prop. It is on the central column, which isn't going to make much of a difference, but I wanted to make sure that I also could control that head movement. We know in the original prop, it just kind of is all over the place. And I wanted to have some control here, especially with the fact that we've added quite a bit of hair. I've added basically a bungee cord, and it's gonna be hard for you to see because there's terrible lighting right now because I'm filming, but you might be able to see right there that there's a bungee cord that's basically running down from the back of her head down into the metal body of the prop and clipped inside. That's just going to keep her head from really getting out of control. It's not really restricting the movement, but I just wanted to be sure that the weight that we added to the head wasn't going to make the already known issues of the prop worse. Now I know we have many naysayers out there with adding weight to props like this. I know the risk I'm taking. We've done this enough times to know there's always a risk in damaging the mechanics, but you can always revisit it. I know with this prop, 90% of it is made out of metal, with the exception of the motor, which always makes me scratch my head. But worst case scenario, if the motor fails, I can always replace it with a heavy duty motor from a place like Fright Props or many of the Halloween stores out there. That way I know all the time and energy I've invested into this prop isn't for nothing. It still would be a pretty cool static prop, but it's good to know that if the motor does fail, I can always swap it out for something that is much heavier duty and that will make this prop much more reliable. Now let's get back to it. Chatted enough. Let's go. Man, he talks a lot. And we're in the home stretch. I'm using my favorite fake mud, which is acrylic latex caulk with silicone in a brown color to her knees and the chain and just a bit on the edges of her dress. Once I've stuck her head on, I'm going to grab the necklace that I painted earlier and just use a little bit of hot glue to attach that. This will help blend that line between her neck and her chest piece. I'm also going to go through and tease her hair a little bit. After that, I use Got To Be Glued hairspray to lock it in place and then embellished with a little permablood. And here's the final result. A burnt Marie Antoinette inspired, captured and tortured vampire queen. I absolutely love how this prop turned out. It's almost unrecognizable if it weren't for the movement and the body position of the original prop. I am so happy I decided to push through with this concept. Thanks y'all so much for watching. We really hope you enjoyed this makeover video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button, and if you love videos like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button as well. It helps us out out as we're a growing channel. And if you just can't wait to know when we do our next video, make sure you click the notification bell. Now remember, if you create it, they will come. As always, thank you so much for the support. Now let's check out the new Punctured piece.
Girl, you smoking. You hot. You fine. Beyonce.
I think all vampires are hot.
They are. Especially when they're on fire.